So today I'm checking in after getting back home from the solo trip I was on. I walked a section of the California Mission Trail, which is a trail that goes from San Diego all the way to San Francisco. And I walked about 130 miles of this. And overall, reflecting on the trip, I'm thinking a lot about what it taught me about fear and the way I experience and move through fear. And I learned a lot about what happens when I'm feeling a lot of fear and intrepidation and I decide to go ahead and go forward with whatever I'm trying to do anyways. So first, before I share like the two tidbits of things that I learned on this trip, I just wanted to share an image that I found so helpful when I'm deep inside fear and fear is kind of clouding my judgment. Tara Brach is one of my favorite speakers. She's a meditation teacher, mindfulness teacher. In her writing and in her talk she gives, she returns to this image that is so helpful, I think, in showing us like what it's like as a human being when we experience fear. So the story is about Mohini, the white tiger, that was a tiger that was kept at a zoo in Washington, D.C. For the first, large chunk of this tiger's life, he lived in a 12 by 12 cage, and he would just kind of pace the perimeter of the cage, and that's just kind of what he did every day. A team of people got together that decided, like, we need to expand this tiger's environment. He looks pretty miserable in there. So we need to add vegetation, water, like things for him to climb, just space for him to be free. And so they did it. They built this entire exhibit, and eventually, once it was completed, Mohini's cage was disassembled and he was, allowed to be free. And what happened was, instead of, leaping off and frolicking into this new free space, Mohini stayed to the side, to the corner, and ended up kind of remaking the cage for himself, just pacing in about a 12 by 12 square, like exactly what he was used to, until all the grass wore away in this one tiny section of this, massive expanse. And it's such a sad image, but it teaches me so much about my own mind when I'm experiencing a lot of fear approaching something, whether that's a goal or a trip or really anything that's like outside of our cage, outside of our comfort zone. Fear is gonna like spin us in loops. Like it's very cyclical, like the thoughts that come up when we're experiencing fear, of the reasons we shouldn't, things that could go wrong, the ways that we might mess up or embarrass ourselves, or all of those things. And what this trip helped me understand is that as soon as I cross the threshold and the boundary of all those thoughts that are keeping me pacing in my cage, there is an immense landscape of freedom outside of that. And freedom contains, connections with other people. Freedom contains new possibilities, meeting someone that tells you about something that you're really interested in and you didn't know about it before. There's so much gifts out there of people willing to help you, people excited to help you. And yeah, just thinking about the abundance of the landscape that Mohini was offered. The things that I did differently on this trip that allowed me to move from fear cage to freedom and receiving the gifts of this trip were, number one, I opened myself up to receiving help from other people and experiencing connection with other people that I met. And then the other main thing I did was I completely eliminated expectations or attachments to like what this trip needed to look like, the destination I needed to reach, like all of those things I decided were not going to be important. And the most important thing was just the fact that I was choosing to do it at all. I found that asking for help and opening up to connection just made the whole experience of what could have been, pretty stressful, a little burdensome of having to navigate and, possibly getting lost and all those things, which, I've done that in the past. Like, I know I can do that, but the whole trip became so much more joyful and enjoyable because I opened myself up to other people who have walked this walk. Every opportunity that came up where someone offered to help me out in some way, I just said yes. For example, there was a woman I walked with on the first 5 days, and one of those days I decided I needed to take a little break. I wanted to do some sightseeing. This woman, she knew I didn't have a car. She knew I was, just traveling on foot. And so she offered to tour me around, and I said yes. And so she drove an hour to come pick me up at my hostel downtown. And then she spent all day with me, touring me around, showing me beaches, and just showing me everything that she loves about this place that she lives. I would have never had that experience. I would have never gotten to see the places that I did get to see while I was there if I had said no. If I had said no thank you and just opted to just spend some time alone with myself, which I do love. I love spending time alone, especially while traveling. But I just felt it was important to experiment and try and see what happens when I say yes. And that taught me that there are so many people out there that, are passionate about the same things you're passionate about. If I'm experiencing fear about something, there are other people also maybe feeling the same way I am. And there's people that moved through that fear and was able to do what I'm trying to do too. So this trip taught me that if I open myself up to seeking out those people, it's just so helpful, and it helps you not feel alone. It helps you feel more joyful as you're on the path, working towards something. So the second thing I did differently on this trip was having no expectations or attachments to reaching a specific end goal on the trail or needing to walk every day. And I knew at this point, I know the way my brain works. I can be very competitive, and I can also set really high expectations of, everything I want to see and everything I want to do. But I've come to understand that not only does that set us up to, feel disappointed or, be exhausted, specifically traveling, but basically in any pursuit in our lives. If the expectations are really high, our, threshold for exhausting ourselves is high. And then also fear, my fear increases. The fear, I'm talking fear in the body. If I had told myself before this trip, I need to make it to this end goal and I have to do it alone, I would have entered into the trip feeling really pressured, and there's no need for that. There's no need for that in, I believe, in any kind of pursuit we do, whether that's writing a book or taking a dance class. I'm just thinking of random things you might have interest in doing in your life. The second we have really high expectations of timelines when it needs to be done or what it needs to look like. So overall, having really high expectations for something skyrockets fear. So the instant we tilt the scale and say there's no expectations, I'm just going to try it out and see what happens. It makes a lot of room for freedom to step outside the cage of pacing and fear and to just see what happens when you step outside. And I hope that this year, as we're entering into a new year, if there's something you've thought about doing, but just the thought of doing it brings up a lot of fear for you, I just want to invite you and remind you that there's an immense amount of gifts just on the other side of just trying and, lowering the expectation and just stepping out and seeing what happens. Thank you for sticking around listening to my reflections. If you want, you could check out, I posted a couple of videos while I was actively traveling, and one of those being about the importance of connection, where I kind of expand on what I talked about in this video on how to connect and what happens when you connect with other people and choose to make those connections. And those are things we can do not just while traveling, but just while existing in the world. So thank you very much, and I'll talk to you next time.